2:14. That has never happened. I have never been this early in my life.
Did you get that on tape?
I'm not sure I know how it happened. I must be failing at something to be early.
No, your foot got a little heavy on the accelerator.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We always start with the important news, then we move to the more important news. The Dallas Cowboys did not lose a football game this weekend. They didn't play one, but they didn't lose one. So, it's kind of a difficult year to figure out in the National Football League. Peyton Manning had a game yesterday where he had decent passes, but he had some interceptions, and his team lost. And the #1 team in the National Football League is the Arizona Cardinals. They're 8-1, and I don't know a single player on the team. I don't know any famous player on the Cardinals. So that's that. Item number 2, in case you're wondering what happens at my age, my wife is out of town for about 12 days. She's taking care of granddaughters in the state of Maine. And you should see the kitchen. It's not a pretty sight. I finally loaded the dishwasher, and it's less bad, but it is not in great shape. So that's that. My apology to the reading group. I failed to note that I was out of pocket last Wednesday, so couldn't be here. We'll get back, I think it's next week for reading group. And this is my first time since the election to be here for current events. So even though it's now old news, we're going to have to do a little bit of debriefing on the election. But I think the place to start today is a little, I don't even know how to describe this. But what we have is more and more brazen ugliness and murder and ugly murder, although there's no such thing as non-ugly murder. But the ISIS group has beheaded another American, and they have had a mass beheading where they have beheaded 33 people at once. And some of them doing the beheadings at this point did it without a mask on. So we have apparently identified the person who was doing the beheading, and that person was European. And so somebody who's from Europe, and I think we've all been following that there are people from the United States, moderately small number, and more people from Great Britain, United Kingdom, and other countries that are joining ISIS. I read a fascinating article in Slate.com, I think. No, it was The Atlantic. You remember The Atlantic Monthly? They have a website called The Atlantic. And I was reading an article about when we used to be able to have a dialogue with fundamentalist Muslims. And it was written by a journalist named Goldberg, who, you can guess, is Jewish, who in the year 2001 actually attended as a journalist a madrasa, which is one of these fundamentalist Muslim schools, and they allowed him in, and he went in, and he took the training, and he took notes, and he wrote about it. That's 2001. I didn't remember what month in 2001 it was, but you remember that in September of 2001, on 9/11, that is when the attack at the World Trade Center occurred in New York City, and basically it has become increasingly impossible for any Western person at all to interact with the actual fundamentalist Muslims who are engaged in the jihad against the West. And so, you don't find this anymore. And I was listening on my way over here with an interview with a journalist who has come back from there, from one of the countries near Iraq. I forget which country it was. And he made this observation. He said, a number of years ago, when we, the journalists, went over there, or other Westerners went over there to conduct business or whatever, we were viewed as individuals by name. They knew me by name. Today, any Westerner in a place where ISIS is in control or trying to be in control is viewed as a symbol of the West, and therefore a target for kidnapping and, of course, ultimately beheading. And so kidnapping for ransom or beheading for the shock PR value, whatever you want to call it. So this is a very bad deal. And again, they're not a danger. I mean, they're not going to attack the United States and take over our country. Let me remind you of something you know. You remember how scared we were just a few weeks ago about Ebola? Well, we did have another doctor die today from Ebola. Someone who caught it there and was brought to Nebraska to a hospital. But the total number of people who have caught Ebola in the United States is 2. That's the total. And they both caught it by literally handling the bodily fluids of Mr. Duncan, who died here in Dallas. The number of people who have caught Ebola that were not actually touching the bodily fluids of an Ebola victim in a hospital is 0. 0. Nobody has caught it. Nobody has died from it. The only 2 people who have died from it caught it in West Africa and came here, and they were so ill it could not be stopped, apparently. And so consequently, we had a lot of overreaction for Ebola. I think that's the way to word it. We overreacted about Ebola. Well, I think the same thing is happening with ISIS. You know, I don't mean to be flippant with this, but do any of you remember ever watching a movie called Jaws? Everybody in the country was afraid of sharks. And there's a simple solution if you're afraid of sharks. Don't get in the water. Don't get in the water. Now, I think it's terrible what ISIS is doing. But if you don't want to get beheaded by ISIS, stay in Texas. I don't think they're going to be beheading anybody in Texas. I could be wrong about that. And yes, I know there was one circumstance in Oklahoma where an individual looks like he might have actually beheaded somebody. And there certainly have been shootings at Fort Hood. But let me think how to word this. I'm working on my wording. We were genuinely worried that Japan was going to go on bombing runs on California in World War II. That would have been bad. Bombing the people of Los Angeles, the people of San Diego, we're talking about a serious war. An individual or a few individuals who do acts of terrorism. Let me remind you of the word. Terrorism is using terror to scare you, to frighten you. It's not a technique to defeat a country. It's a technique, I'm going to use a blunt word, to demoralize a country. It is intended to make you not live your normal life. That's what it's intended to do. And so acts of terrorism are very frightening, but not actually dangerous to our country. If you take all of the people that have been killed from acts of terrorism in the United States, it is, and every one of these deaths is tragic and sad, but it is minuscule. It's not many. Now, if they ever got hold of a nuclear weapon and found a way to get it here, that's a different issue. So, do we need to be diligent and vigilant against ISIS? Yes. But do we need to worry about it in Garland, Texas? No. We don't need to worry about that in Garland, Texas, or in Mesquite, Texas, or in Dallas, Texas. I think that we're a long way from being worried about that. But they are ugly, and it is ghastly, and from every indication they have decided that beheadings is part of their message, part of their public relations attempt to get people to grasp. This is pretty scary to me in terms of its implications. It appears that the more they've done towards the beheadings arena, the more they have successfully recruited other people to come join them. I don't even know how to think about that. But that's what appears to be happening. Their numbers are growing. They're not large, but they're growing in small ways. And today, we saw a photograph of a person without a hood on who was European who was participating in the beheading. So that's the ISIS story at the moment of today. All right, the next story we'll deal with. Anybody got a question or comment about ISIS? Okay? The next story. Now, I'm going to begin to get to the election, and so I'm going to pause and make a little comment. Some of you follow the wrong political philosophy. You're not following the correct political philosophy. You see my smile as I'm saying this. You all know that I'm a Democrat. And a couple of you have commented that you're not wild about my politics. And I just want to say something. You have won everything. I've won nothing. I am a defeated guy. And so recognize that I'm in agony and have a little compassion for me instead of getting unhappy with me, because you won everything. And so let's kind of remember that. And so I'm going to talk about the outcome of the election. The Republicans won the universe. This is now a universe run by the Republicans. Yes?
Before you get tied up in that, one more question about the other side.
All right.
Eastfield, you had some problems over there.
You talking about the knife incident in the stairway? Yeah. My first comment is...
We were worried about you.
Am I worried about that?
No, I said we were worried about you.
No, okay. My first comment is, I'll tell you what did bother me about that. I learned about it from the news. I didn't learn about it from internal communication. There have been other times when there have been reports of someone with a gun, the campus is on lockdown, and we get text messages. For some reason, no text message went out this time. From every indication, first of all, and I know you know this, how many buildings are there at Brookdale at Club Hill? 5.
Well, 5 and this one.
5 plus this one. All right. So you can imagine that if something bad happened in building 1, that would be terrible. But if you live in building 6, you're nowhere near the danger. So where that occurred at Eastfield was in a particular building. I've been to that building. It was behind a particular stairway. And I haven't been at that stairway once this year. it looked like it was a hiding place for a person who was clearly disturbed in some way. So, did I get worried? No, I did not. But I will tell you this, and this is something that's different. When I now start a semester, one of the things I do is I look at the classroom and I figure out what I would do and how I would configure the desks if I heard gunshots down the hall. Now that's just ridiculous that I have to figure that out. But the doors now have a lock that you can set on the inside where it cannot be opened from the outside. There's glass in the doors, but there's a corner of every room where you can get where there's not a line of sight to the door, the glass in the door. So I'm at least thinking about stuff like that. But I was not worried in that incident because I didn't find out about it until the next day. So that was kind of amazing.
That's why he didn't worry.
Yeah, that's why I didn't worry. Okay, the Republicans won the universe. They won all the governor's races in terms of major majority. They won most of the governor's races. They took over the Senate. They increased their lead in the House. And in Texas, they won everything big. And in a minute, I'm going to tell you about one race in Texas. And so the Republicans won the universe. Now, since they did, and you have to understand that I'm not real happy about this outcome, then you can understand that I'm going to try to look for, survivable explanations, if not some silver linings for someone on the other side. So let me talk about this for a minute. The first observation is we have had 5 presidents in my lifetime who served two full terms. They are Dwight Eisenhower in the 1950s, 52, technically he entered office in 53 and then left in 61. He was elected in 52 and Kennedy was elected in 60. All right, so Dwight Eisenhower served 2 full terms. Then you've got to wait all the way to Ronald Reagan for the next one. If you'll remember, Kennedy followed Eisenhower. He was assassinated. Johnson was only elected for 1 term as president. He served a term and a half, but was only elected as president for 1 term. And then Nixon did win 2 elections, but resigned in disgrace and did not finish his 2nd term. After Nixon, Ford was president. And if you're not remembering this, Gerald Ford is the only president in, I think, American history that served as president that was never elected to either vice president or president. He was appointed after Spiro Agnew resigned, and then he became president. So Ford lost, Jimmy Carter won only 1 term, then you get to Ronald Reagan. And then George H.W. Bush only served 1 term, and the next president to serve 2 terms was Bill Clinton, and then right after Bill Clinton was George W. Bush, and right after George W. Bush we have Barack Obama, and unless something happens, he'll serve 2 full terms. This is not unimportant. We've had 3 presidents in a row elected to 2 terms, after many times without one. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so why did I mention all this? In the 6th year, that's what this was, the midterm election of the 2nd term, Eisenhower did not have, his party, Republicans, did not have the Senate, but they lost more seats in the Senate dramatically. Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama all lost the Senate in the 6th year. So in other words, somehow it's part of American fact that in the 6th year of a presidency, you lose the universe. So it's not unique to Obama. It happened to Bush, to Clinton, to Reagan, to Eisenhower. Eisenhower, in his case, he just got worse off, but it was still a very big defeat for Eisenhower's party. So that's the first comment. The second comment is, I'm trying to think of the way to say this. Nobody should be bragging too much. There are countries with high voter turnout. High voter turnout. The highest country is about 93%. It's a South American country. Voter turnout, I'm now talking about comparing apples to apples, the equivalent in other countries of midterm elections. Not the major election, the midterm elections. There are countries with high voter turnout. There are countries with medium voter turnout. There are countries with low voter turnout. High voter turnout, there are a couple in the 80s, and then medium, and then low. So let's check now. The United States is either in the high voter turnout, medium voter turnout, or low voter turnout. Raise your hand if you think it's high voter turnout. Raise your hand if you think it's medium voter turnout. Raise your hand if you think it's low voter turnout. You're all wrong. It's not low voter turnout. It's a new category, lowest voter turnout. We're not among the low. We are the lowest in the world in voter turnout in midterm election. Our voter turnout was 36%. 36%. That's embarrassing. All right? Then you have states with their voter turnouts. And so you've got high voter turnout states, and in the United States, high voter turnout states is much lower than high voter turnouts in other countries. Our highest voter turnout was, I think, 58%. I think the highest state was 58%. For some reason, I don't remember which state it was. I think it might have been Maine, but Alaska was number 2 at 55%. I happen to remember that figure. All right, you've got medium voter turnout states and low voter turnout states. Here are the options. Texas, the state we're in, high voter turnout, medium voter turnout, low voter turnout. Vote. Raise your hand if you vote for high voter turnout. Medium voter turnout, 1. Low voter turnout. We were number 49 out of 50 states. We were number 49 at 28.5% voter turnout in the state of Texas. 28.5%. The only state lower was Indiana at 28%. Yes?
In most of the countries that have such a high turnout, don't they vote on Sunday?
There are a lot of things that some of these other countries do to help with voter turnout. Some of them, and I have to go back and get the list out, but some of them have a national holiday to vote. So in other words, you can't be working on that day. You have a holiday from work and you can go vote, and you're paid. So it's a paid national holiday. Other countries make it a law that you have to vote. Australia, you have to vote. I know that you know this, but in the states with Republican governors and Republican legislatures, dominant all three, Republican House, Republican Senate, State House, State Senate, and Governor. Those states have passed new laws, 28 of them. 28 of those states to make it more difficult to vote. That's a fact.
More difficult.
Voter ID laws, more restrictive identification laws, fewer days of early voting, those kinds of laws. They've made it more restrictive. Now, yes?
Are the liquor stores still closed on voting day?
I'm sorry?
The liquor stores thing?
I don't know the answer to that. She asked, are liquor stores closed on voting day? I don't know. I just know I got really drunk that night when the returns came. No, I didn't. I haven't had 2 drinks in one day in a long time. Yes.
How does the country assure that everyone votes? You were saying one country requires.
Yeah, it's mandatory, and I don't know what the penalty is, but there is in fact an actual penalty, a fine, something like that, in countries like Australia that make it a law to vote. So I have not studied what the law is, but the wording used in the articles is they make it mandatory to vote by law. So that's all I know. So I mean, you know, it's against the law to speed in the United States. It's also against the law to rob a bank, but if you speed, you pay a small fine. If you rob a bank, you go to jail. So I'm sure that it's a moderate fine, is my guess. Okay, now, we got something else we're comparing all of this. When I tell you that the Republicans run the universe, let me tell you how much I mean. This is pretty astonishing, what I'm about to tell you. If you take all of the people in the United States, all of them, 318 million, 49% of all of the people in the United States live in states where there is a Republican governor, a Republican state house, and a Republican state senate. 49% of everybody in America lives in a Republican dominant, not mixed, not Democratic House and Republican Senate and Democrat governor or Republican governor. The Republicans own all 3. In the United States, right at 24% of Americans live in a Democratic governor, Democratic state house, Democratic state senate. So 49% versus 24%. It's not that close. If you took out California, which is the largest population in the country, it is a Democratic governor, Democratic House, Democratic Senate. If you took out California, the number of Americans who live in a Democratic-controlled state government is 3.5%. So in other words, Republicans own the universe. And this is really astonishing. Now, the next thing is you began asking, how did the Republicans win everything in this election? I have an answer. They got more votes. So let's talk about the votes. You all know what exit polls are. There are 2 kinds of polls. Well, actually, there are 3 or 4 kinds of polls. But the good polls before an election, the Gallup poll, something like that, they will call you and they will say, you know, do you plan to vote in the next election? And they'll ask you a series of questions, and you will answer, and then they will give the projections. Oh, I'm forgetting something. Hold on. I've got to tell you something. On the polls on this election, the polls are never exactly right. And when the polls are not exactly right, the polls in the midterm elections, like this one, are more not right than the polls in a presidential election. You understand the concept? Harder to get accurate polls. But in every midterm election, some of the polls are skewed, meaning they get it wrong, in the direction of the Republicans. In other words, they got it wrong, and by getting it wrong, the Republicans did better than they thought the polls said they would. And some of them are skewed Democratic. In this election, this has never happened, according to the experts. Every single poll, all of them, underestimated the size of the Republican vote. In other words, they were all skewed in the direction of the Democrats, all of them. And what that means is that the Democrats who were supposed to win, some of them did not win, and the Democrats who were supposed to be close lost by a bigger margin. Let me give you the one that's most famous in the country. A man named Mitch McConnell in Kentucky was supposed to beat Allison Grimes by 7.5%. That was what the final poll said. Mitch McConnell beat Allison Grimes by 14%. Nearly double. That means the poll was skewed in the direction of the Democrat. And it turns out that the national average missed it by 5%, predicting the Democrats would do better than they did, and they missed it a total of 5%. Nobody has figured this out yet. I mean, this is the finding. They can't figure out why they missed it that badly. So that's pretty interesting. Okay, now, who voted for whom? Remembering that in Texas, 69.5% of eligible voters in Texas did not vote. And nationally, 64% of eligible voters did not vote. So you got to remember that to start with. So, in polling, the polls that happen before the election are one kind, and then they have what they call exit poll. You're walking out of the election, you have voted, so they know you have voted. And they ask you, they don't ask your name, they say, who did you vote for, and what's your age range, and what's your economic background, and what's your ethnicity. Here's what we know. You ready? White males, non-Hispanic males, me, you, I think everybody here who's male is non-Hispanic. The men in this room, white non-Hispanic, 80% voted Republican. 8 out of 10, 80 out of 100. Sometimes you just wonder, how can all of our men be that badly misinformed? Whereas obviously, people like me who voted Democrat, we were only 20% of the white males. All right? White females, and I apologize, I don't remember the precise number, but it was somewhere around, I could be off a little bit on this, 67% voted Republican. It was in the mid-60s. So, what that means is, the women vote among white women, non-Hispanic, went to Republicans. All right? African Americans, it doesn't matter if they were men or women, that was about 94% Democratic. Hispanics, nationally, Hispanic men and Hispanic women voted in the 65% range, give or take, for Democrats. So in other words, the Democrats still got the Hispanic vote. In Texas, the Republican candidate Greg Abbott actually won the Hispanic male vote 49 to 48%, which is just astonishing. Partly because he's married to a Hispanic woman, he had his mother-in-law on TV commercials, and he worked hard at that. He did not win the Hispanic female vote, but it was closer in Texas than nationally. If you took out Texas, where Greg Abbott did unusually well for the Hispanic vote, if you took out Texas, the Republicans did not make inroads in the Hispanic vote. So, now, two other little tidbits here. If you look at the national exit polls, people who were older, kind of 50 and up, that's ballpark, voted Republican, and people who were younger voted Democrat. Now, you kind of look at all that, and you say the Republican Party gets the votes of the white voters and the older voters. And the Democratic Party gets the votes of the African Americans and Hispanic and the younger voters. The problem is, for Democrats, that younger voters don't show up to vote in midterm elections. Give you one state with a firm figure. In Colorado, in the last presidential election, 20% of the people who voted in Colorado in the last presidential election 2 years ago voted, 20% of the voters were younger, 18 to 25, and they voted Democratic. This year, 13% of the voters were younger. So the drop-off was dramatic. That's the kind of thing that's happening. So, right now, if you're listening to the news at all, you are hearing these kinds of comments. The Democrats have got to figure out a way to get the white working male vote. Working, blue-collar working. The Republicans have got to figure out a way to get more of the Hispanic vote. Both Democrats and Republicans acknowledge, without any discussion, it's acknowledged and acknowledged that African Americans are going to vote Democratic. Even though there is a black member of the Senate, male, for the first time, Republican. And so you've got some candidates who are black who are making it into office that are Republicans, but they're not getting the black vote, even the black candidates. So they're getting the white vote. So that's kind of what happened in this election. So Republicans won the universe. They did it with higher voter turnout among white voters and older voters, and the Democrats, their voters, Hispanic, African American, young, did not show up to vote. Yes?
I have a question.
All right?
If only 49% voted, is the vote correct?
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, if you didn't vote, then that is be screwed up vote. It can't be
If you didn't vote, you can't complain. If you didn't vote, I mean, the only election, the only poll that matters is people going to the polls and voting. And so, do I think it's healthy for our democracy that people are not voting? No, I do not think that's healthy. Do I think that the Republicans' massive victory should be viewed even by Republicans as a little nervous because so many didn't vote? They probably should view it that way, but they won't. They won. And so I promise you, if the Democrats had won this way, the Democrats would be bragging at how well they did. So that's for sure. Okay. Any other questions about the aftermath of the election? Nobody?
Any comment on the vote about giving driver's license to illegal immigrants in Oregon, which is a liberal state?
And I'm embarrassed to tell you, how did that end up?
They voted it down.
Okay. I don't have any comment except that I would like to look at, I'm going to make the assumption that Oregon's voter turnout was again not as high as a presidential year. I do know this, it's kind of interesting. When you try to figure out the referendums and the issues votes, you know, people voting on issues. For example, in Washington State, I think it was, they actually voted directly for stronger restrictions on who can buy a gun. There were 4 or 5 state referendums on marijuana, and 4 of the 5, or 3 of the 4, I think it was 4 of the 5, voted for more marijuana. So the reality is, in general, the social issues went liberal, but I don't know how I missed that, Bob, but you're right, that would be a significant idea that they voted down the driver's licenses. California allows driver's licenses for undocumented folks. And if you haven't heard me give this little brief comment on it, I think we all ought to be in favor of it, and I'll tell you why. Let's check. Do any of you think there are any undocumented people in the United States? 11 million. Do any of you think that any of them drive? Many of them drive. They cannot get insurance without a driver's license. Can't get insurance. Would any of you like to be in a wreck with an uninsured, undocumented worker?
No.
I would not. I would rather them have a way to get insurance. And my insurance costs me more because I have to pay for something called uninsured motorist. And so my argument is, if they're going to drive, we need to find a way to make them buy insurance like everybody else. Yes?
Wasn't there something going on here in the state of Texas where you could go and buy a 30-day policy?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry, I just don't know. I'm not going to deny that it's there, but I don't know. But I do know that there are plenty of people in the state of Texas who are driving, who are undocumented. That much I know. Yes?
Just because they have a driver's license doesn't mean they're going to buy insurance, though.
No, but without a driver's license, they can't buy insurance. So I mean, you know, you are certainly right. There are white, non-Hispanic drivers who have a driver's license who don't buy insurance. So you're right. Having a driver's license doesn't guarantee insurance, but having no driver's license guarantees no insurance.
I like your undocumented and my illegal,
That's
too.
right. Yeah, I noticed that too. I wasn't going to comment on it. All right. Now, that now brings us to our next discussion. Now, I've got to remember. You have to remember that I acknowledged at the beginning today that I lost everything. And anybody who doesn't like my views, just remember you won and I lost. So let me make a couple of comments here.
You didn't lose on the DOA vote.
Which one?
On the district attorney, you didn't lose that
Oh,
one.
all right. That's what I was going to talk about. Let me do that now. This is, in fact, a difference between Republicans and Democrats in general. I'm serious about this. In the state of Texas, in the statewide races, on the Republican ticket, you had Greg Abbott, who got about 50% of the newspaper endorsements. And you had Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor, and he got 0% of the newspaper endorsements. 0. Houston Chronicle said he'll be a demagogue. Corpus Christi Caller-Times said, look, if you're a Republican, vote for your Republicans, but please don't vote for Patrick. Paxton wasn't a lot better. He got very little support. Patrick and Paxton won their races with the same massive margin that Greg Abbott won the governor's race. So these endorsements had 0 impact. Whereas in Dallas County, every Democrat in a county-wide race, meaning everybody in the county votes for this. County judge, that's the equivalent of the county mayor. All of the judges that were voted on full county, the Democrats won by a massive margin. But the district attorney, Craig Watkins, lost to Susan Hogg. If you look at the votes, the Democrats abandoned Craig Watkins. You can go ahead and ask me and I'll tell you. I voted straight Democratic ticket. But I got to that race, there's a way to do this, and I deselected Craig Watkins. I did not vote for Craig Watkins. I didn't vote for Susan Hogg. I don't vote Republican. I left that one blank. Well, let me tell you, a whole lot of other Democrats did what I did. They either voted for Susan Hogg or they left his blank because he lost. I think this is not unimportant. Everybody in this room admits, including me, that Craig Watkins did not deserve another term. He has problems of integrity. Why is it that Democrats can refuse to put somebody in office that shouldn't be there, and Republicans en masse put Patrick in office when everybody in the state looking at him said he's going to be a danger? I just think that's significant. That's significant. So you can do with that what you want to. But remember, I lost, so I'm feeling bad. All right? Now we get to this. I don't know where you want to start with this. Let me remind you of something. Lyndon Johnson utterly destroyed Barry Goldwater in the Electoral College. Ronald Reagan utterly destroyed Jimmy Carter, and more than that with Walter Mondale in the Electoral College. Barack Obama won handy Electoral College victories, as did Bill Clinton, pretty much both terms, but especially over Bob Dole. But in the year 2000, as you all remember, George W. Bush lost the popular vote to Al Gore. Yeah. And he won the Electoral College by the hanging chads of Florida. It was the closest Electoral College spread in my lifetime, by far. Without a doubt. It was extraordinarily close. I just want to ask you, and I want you to think about this. Did George W. Bush act like, by his decision-making, by his words, did he act like, I have a mandate, or it was close, I'm going to keep both parties carefully in communication because it was so close? He acted like he had a mandate. He actually used that word once. And so, if you go back and you look at the last three Republican presidents, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, the father of this President Bush, and George W. Bush, two of the three, let me say this again, two of the three issued executive orders providing, in essence, amnesty to undocumented people. Two of the three. Reagan did it, and Bush did it. Barack Obama looks like he's about to issue an executive order for undocumented people. And there are Republicans right now who are saying, and these are direct quotes, this will, what was Boehner's quote? It's not muddy the water, it's boil over the pot. What was the phrase he used?
Start a fire, something like that.
I wish I could remember. Poison the pot.
Yeah.
He said, poison the pot. He said, if Barack Obama issues an executive order, it will poison the pot. Let me tell you that no Republicans were using the language of poison the pot when Reagan did it and when this President Bush did it. None of them did. In other words, Obama actually said a few months ago, look, You folks get it done in Congress, and if you don't, I'm going to do it by executive order. And Boehner and McConnell said, we're going to get it done. They both said that. Never got done. It was a probably strategic mistake that President Obama did not do it early in the fall. That might have been very politically motivated. But the bottom line is that President Obama is about to do what President Reagan did and what President Bush did, and the Republicans are saying he doesn't have the right to do that. That's my problem with this. Yes?
How many thousands of people did the people back there that you're...
In Reagan's case, I'm sorry, I don't remember in Bush's case, but in Reagan's case, it was in the millions plural. I don't remember how many million, but it was in the millions plural. He gave amnesty. Here's what he did. This is exactly what he did. He said, this is what President Reagan said, let's take the people who are here now, who got here illegally, and let's give them, and they actually used the word amnesty, and from this point forward, we will close the borders. Well, that's what Reagan said. Bush said something similar, and the fact is, by the way, you want to know the most interesting thing? The number of people coming across the border under President Obama, and the number of deportations he has had, it's the best in years. He's got fewer people coming across the border than President Bush did, and he's deporting more than President Bush did. That's why the liberals are so mad. But the reality is, the real question is this, and this is a legitimate question. We'll end with this. Who's the president? That's not a dumb question. Who's the president? Barack Obama was elected to fulfill the duties of the president, which allows some executive orders, for a full 8 years. He's not no longer the president because he lost the midterm election. He is the president, and he will be the president until Inauguration Day in 2017.
Who's saying he's not?
Well, I could give you the quotes to say he should not be doing any of this because he's lost his support and he's lost his mandate from people in office. From people in office. But after saying all of that, let me just end with what I said. There is no way to water down or sugarcoat the outcome. The Republicans won the universe. They won everything. And if you want to know what is most worrisome to Democrats in their heart of hearts, it is the people who pay careful attention and say that 49% of Americans in this country live in a state that is all Republican. Governor and state house and state senate. And that number is rising. That's phenomenal. That has not happened in our lifetime. Well, that's current events for today, but as you well know, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is the Cowboys had a week off. Romo might be in good shape this weekend. They're looking pretty good. We'll see how that goes. I'll see you next Monday and then reading group next Wednesday. Thank you.